Hi, everyone. So go ahead and welcome to our first week for our Science for Healthcare class. We're in our biology unit, so we're going to cover 4 weeks of biology. And this first week, we're going to be focusing on the cell. We're going to focus in on the cellular level of living organisms. And so here's a few discussion questions that I have for us to kind of talk about before we get into it. First question is, how big are cells? How many cells do we have? And are there different types of cells? What are the different types of cells? Are they simple or are they more complex? So we're going to watch a video, and I want you to be thinking about these 4 questions when we watch this video. This video will answer these 4 questions.
Every living organism is made up of cells, from plants to the lowliest worm to the most complex human being. But what is a cell? Well, a cell is a small, self-contained unit within a whole organism. Kind of like a room within a house. It is the smallest unit that can be classified as a living thing. We can think of them as the building blocks of life. So how many cells do you think you have in your body? 1,000? 1,000,000? 1,000,000,000? More. We contain around 50 trillion cells. Have a look at your little finger. There's probably about 10 billion cells in there. Now, cells come in all different shapes and sizes. Occasionally, cells can be large enough to be seen by the human eye. For example, the yolk of a chicken egg is actually a single cell, and some cells are really long, such as a nerve cell that runs the entire length of your spine. However, most cells are really, really tiny and can only be seen under a microscope. They are so tiny that you could fit about 10 of them across one of your hairs. Now, there are many different types of cells, and each cell carries out its own jobs. Some of these jobs are common to all cells, such as making proteins and producing energy, while some jobs are specific to the type of cell. A human sperm cell has to be able to swim, while the cells that produce a peacock's tail must produce beautiful coloured pigments. Sometimes cells can exist on their own, such as a simple bacterium or a single-celled organism called an amoeba. But mostly, cells work together to form more complex multicellular organisms, such as animals, plants, and insects. In a multicellular organism, as well as doing its own jobs, each cell also works together with the other cells around it to carry out an overall job. For example, the cells of the heart work together to pump blood around your body. So, cells come in all shapes and forms and have all sorts of jobs, but they are all fundamental building blocks of living organisms. Watch this video to learn more about different types of cells.
All right, I will send a link to this person's YouTube channel because he has a lot of very good videos, just like his next one. We'll talk about the different types of cells. So this is a great place where you can go and try to explore some of these other areas. So let's go back to our discussion questions. So what is a cell? How would you describe a cell after watching that video using your own words? Who would like to take a stab at
it? It's a small living organism.
Yep, every living organism is made of them. Some living organisms are just one cell, like some bacteria is just one cell itself. As a human being, are we just one cell?
No.
No, we are made up of many cells. And so that's like our third question. Did you hear how many cells make up our body?
Trillions?
Yeah, 50 trillion. 50 trillion. And he was saying like there was 10 billion just in our small finger. So I don't remember who said it, but they used the word microscopic. Most of our cells are that small, microscopic. It doesn't mean all of them are. Some of our cells are big enough where we could see them. Well, not necessarily our cells, but there are cells out there, and we're going to look at some in nature that we can actually see with our own eye. And we can actually see the different parts of the cell. We will look at that. Some cells are also really long. Like in our nervous system, there are cells that go all the way down our spine and stretch out to different parts of our body. And they're these really, really long, thin cells that are our neurons, our nerves. So how big? Some of these questions don't have one exact answer, because cells are different shapes and sizes based on where they are in the body and what the purpose is of these cells, because there are so many different types of cells. There's blood cells. Even inside blood cells, we have different types. We have red blood cells and white blood cells, which we will talk about today. We have stem cells that help development and growth. We have nerve cells that work with our nervous system. And we have tissues that help us move. So that's kind of our introduction to cells. We're going to look at all the different parts of a cell. And the word that we use for the different parts of a cell are called organelles. And so here's some different organelles inside of our body. Go ahead and say all of these with me. One of the purposes of this class is to practice a lot of vocabulary. And there's a lot of research and learning that says when you learn a new word, you need to see the word, you need to hear the word, you need to say the word, you need to write the word 7 times for it to be converted into your long-term memory. So go ahead and repeat after me. Let's read through these words. First one, repeat after me. Nucleus. Go ahead and say it. Nucleus. We have DNA, cell membrane, mitochondria, cell wall, and chloroplast. These are 5 organelles that are very popular, and we're going to look at them and kind of look at their definitions. If you have a notepad, I would recommend writing these words down and kind of writing the definitions and taking notes, because that writing process will really help you solidify that information and turn it into long-term memory. So we're going to look here. Here's an animal cell, and there are all these different organelles, these different parts of the cell. The most popular ones are these here off to the side that we will look at. In an animal cell, we do see the nucleus. The nucleus is right here, that big center part of the cell. It is the largest part of the cell. And in most cells, especially the ones that are big enough that we can see without a microscope, that's primarily what you see, is this big nucleus in the center. What do we know about the nucleus? Does anyone know anything about the nucleus? What do you remember about the nucleus?
It holds the DNA.
Correct. Very good. Yep. It holds the DNA. I always think of the nucleus as kind of like the brain of the cell. It has all the information, right? It is telling the cell what to do. It has all that information, all that DNA, and that DNA tells it what protein to make and how to function. It's kind of like the brain of the cell. The next biggest part of the cell is the cell membrane. We see that here. Here's our word, cell membrane. And that is basically all of the, it's like this thin layer, right? This orange, this yellowish orange layer going all the way around it. It's kind of like the skin. It's like the skin of the cell. What do we know about the cell membrane? Do we know anything about the cell membrane?
I'm going to guess and say it protects the cell.
Yes, yep, it does protect the cell. It's kind of like the barrier of it. The big important job of the cell membrane, not only protecting, but it's this idea of like transportation. It allows good things into the cell It takes bad things and take it out of the cell. It allows for things to flow in between the cells. So it does act as like protection, stopping bad things from entering, but it also allows good things to come in. It's kind of this, it's almost like a window or like a door that it allows this transportation of things into the cell.
Like
We're
a
gonna look at that.
filter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like a filter. It's a good idea. And then our last one, a very important one that a lot of people talk about, are the mitochondria. In this case, it's these blue ones right here, is the mitochondrion, which is the plural form, or mitochondria. What do we know about the mitochondria? And if we don't, that's okay. There's a few interesting things about the mitochondria that we will read, but let's go back to the nucleus. Can I have a volunteer read this sentence? Rainbow, would you like to unmute yourself and read this sentence?
The nucleus is a organelle which stores the genetic material.
Very good, and that's
DNA.
the DNA. Yep, the genetic material is the DNA. And we see that in this picture here. So here we see individual cells, like here's one cell right here. Here is another cell. And that the largest part of most cells, that big circle, is the nucleus. And inside that nucleus, we would find all of the chromosomes, which are made up of all of those strings of DNA folded onto each other, just going back and forth, folded, are all of these code, these strips of DNA filtered through there. All right, next one is, so I wanted to look at the wording of nucleus itself. So I went to etymology.com to kind of see, like, where did this word actually come from? Like, how old is it? When was it first used? And a lot of these science words originally come from Latin, that they take an existing Latin word to describe the scientific world. And so they took the Latin word nuclea, what meant kernel or little nut. And they took the word little nut. So when you say the word nucleus, you're actually saying little nut in Latin, nucola, or like seed, center, source. And that word has now changed a lot over time. When we talk about nucleus, nucleus now kind of just means the center, right? We have the center of the cell, the nucleus. When we get into chemistry, you see the nucleus of atoms, the neutrons and the protons with the electrons going around them. The neutrons and the protons are the nucleus of the atom. And so we see words like nuclear now is basically the energy that we're getting from those atoms, from that atomic level, the nucleus of an atom. So now the word nucleus has multiple meanings. It's not just the nucleus of a cell, but also the nucleus of atoms, which allows us to now create other words like mononuclear. This can refer to some cells as well. When I see the word mononuclear, I see two roots. I see the word mono, and I see nuclear, meaning small or center. What does mono mean? When we see the root word mono in a word, what does that mean?
It means one.
Yes, it means one. And there are a bunch of words with mono, like I think monocle, which is like one glass, one eyepiece, a monocle that you look through. A monopoly is when one company owns everything. They have a monopoly. If someone is monolingual, they only speak one language. So if we see mono in a word, we know it has to deal with one. So mononuclear, it has one nucleus. Thermonuclear is a science that works with like hydrogen bombs. Again, they're working with those atoms. What does thermo mean? Thermo. Any guesses?
Heat.
Oh, good. Yeah, heat. I think of thermals more as like temperature, but yeah, but heat. Where we're measuring the amount of heat or the lack of heat in an environment. That's why we see words like thermometer, which is measuring, meter to measure, thermo, heat or temperature. So a thermometer, we're measuring the temperature. If we see thermodynamics, dynamics are the rules or the laws of heat and temperature. How does heat affect things? So thermonuclear is nuclear energy looking at heat, and we see things like hydrogen bonds. So temperature. So we're breaking up words, and that's a skill that we're going to do a lot in this class, is we're going to come across these words and kind of slice them apart, because that'll help us remember them in the long term. So that was nucleus. Now we're going to look at cell membrane, a kind of filter. That was a great description of it, going all the way around. Can I get a volunteer to read cell membrane? Maurice, would you like to read cell membrane? Are you there, Maurice?
Okay, Sean. Cell membrane. The plasma membrane or the cell membrane provides protection for a cell. It also provides a fixed environment inside the cell, and that membrane has several different functions. One is to transport nutrients into the cell and also to transport toxic substances out of the cell.
Excellent, very good. I see the word toxic and I think bad. So again, it's this idea of allowing the nutrients, allowing the good things into the cell, oxygen, water, all of the things that the cell needs for life and for function. And then it takes all of the bad things. Once it's produced everything, it takes all the toxins and the bad things out of the cell. And it allows like that filter, all for protection. So that is our cell membrane. The last organelle we wanted to look at was mitochondria. Can I get a volunteer to read mitochondria? Who would like to read?
I can do it.
Perfect, thank you, Libby.
Mitochondria are cell organelles that generate most of the chemical energy needed to power the cell's biochemical reactions.
Yeah, very good. So when I hear the word mitochondria, I think energy or powerhouse. So if, to use an analogy, if the nucleus was the brain, right, it has all the information, right, it has all the information, the mitochondria would be kind of like the heart, right? It produces the energy. It is what creates all of the energy for the cell. It is its powerhouse. It's its power station for the cell. And so that is the mitochondria. When I looked up mitochondria, because I was just curious, I went to the etymology website and was like, what is the history of it? And it actually comes from Greek root words, mitos, meaning thread, and chondros, meaning a granule. And that really kind of confused me at first. I was like, why are they using the word thread? And so I did a little more digging into the history of it. And the mitochondria was first discovered back in 1857. So we're talking, a long time ago, 150 years ago. It then got the name of bioblast in 1886. And then in 1898, they changed the name to mitochondria. And back then, because we're talking about 1898, way back then, when they're studying the cells for the first time, the way that they would remove the mitochondria from the cell itself to study it, they would use a really, really fine needle and thread to kind of lace through it to kind of study the mitochondria that way. And that's why the root word of it is thread, because that's what the scientists were using to study it and to discover it. So it was the mitochondria. It was the thing that you used the thread to poke out of the cell to study it. Isn't that interesting? Who knew? And so I did a little digging. And so that's kind of another reason. I hope that kind of helps you kind of remember the words. So we're going to have two more organelles to talk about. These, however, do not have to do with animal cells. They have to do with plant cells. So here we see an image of a plant cell. Different things here. Our first one is our cell wall, which is this really, really thick green structure going all the way around the plant cell. And then we see the chloroplast, which are these green organelles right in here. what could their function be? Have we heard these words before, and what do we know about cell wall and chloroplast? Any ideas?
I think the chloroplast does something with like photosynthesis or something in that process, maybe.
Yes, absolutely. You got it. So plants are really special compared to humans. Plants don't have to eat food like we do. They don't have to drink things like we do for digestion to get energy. They get energy in a different way. They get energy through the sun through a process called photosynthesis. And we will look at that they literally take water from the ground. They take carbon dioxide from they take carbon dioxide and water, and they take those two and they convert it into glucose or energy for their body to use. And then there's some oxygen left over that they put out into the environment. And so that process is all done through the chloroplast, and they use the energy from the sun. And that's why most plants are really green, because what you're seeing are a lot of those chloroplasts. Actually, that gives them that green color, and that's how they're getting that energy. So first, let's go back to cell wall. Can I get a volunteer to read our cell wall?
I can do it. Cell wall, a rigid layer outside the cell membrane of the cells of plants, fungi, and bacteria. In the algae and higher plants, it consists mainly of cellulose.
Very good, cellulose. Yep, not there. And talking about plants, fungi, and bacteria, all of these. So animal cells do not have this cell wall. That's one of the main things that are different about the two of us. We can see that. So like here I'm looking at a leaf. We can actually see those individual cells, and we can see those dark lines, which are actually the cell wall, which is giving it that structure. But that cellulose, that hard structure, is also when the cell dies. So if you look at a dead leaf, what this is a picture of, you notice how it makes that like crunching sound, right? It goes like, that crunching sound is actually you ripping the cells apart at the cellular level, and those cell walls breaking and tearing that hard cellulose after it is dead. That's something interesting about cell walls, and you can actually see them in plant life. One of the activities that I'll have you do online is kind of look at the world around you and see where can you see cells with the naked eye without a microscope, because not all cells are microscopic. Some cells we can actually see without a microscope. Where do you see them in the world around you? Okay. Our next one is chloroplast. Chloroplast. Who would like to read this definition?
Or read it.
Okay, go ahead.
Chloroplasts are organelles that conduct photosynthesis where it captures the energy from sunlight.
Yeah, very good, like we were talking about. And so here's a picture of photosynthesis. So again, it takes that energy from the sun, it takes carbon dioxide and water, and then it produces glucose energy from that, actually one molecule of sugar. And then it has all this leftover oxygen that it doesn't need, so then it puts oxygen in the atmosphere for us to breathe in, which is very nice of them. Thank you, plants. So here's chloroplast. One of the activities that I'm going to do online is I gave you the link to the etymology website, like I showed you with mitochondria and that too, where you can actually see the different Greek or Latin root words. Chloroplast is made up of two, chloro and plast. I want you, as your assignment, to go to the website, put it in, and see if you can figure out what are those two root words in Greek or Latin, and what do they mean? What do they tell us about the meaning of chloroplast, or the history of scientists discovering what chloroplasts were? So that is one of your activities to do, is to Google that. You can also do this with any of our other words, like photosynthesis. You can break it up and say, oh, there's the root word photo, and photo means light. Synthesis means to filter. So you're filtering light. That's what these plants are doing. They're taking that light energy and they're filtering it, and they're using that energy from light. If we look at words like photograph, graph means to write or to put on paper. Photo is light, so we're taking light and putting it on paper, which is a photograph. It is that light on paper. So we're breaking up those root words. So that's photosynthesis. First, we had plant cells and animal cells, and we were thinking about the differences. What are things that animal cells have that plant cells do not? What did you come up with you and your partner?
Animal cells have what is that? Centriole cells that plants don't, I believe.
Okay. Here, the centrally. Yep, we do not see that here on the plant side of it at all. Okay. Very good. Anything else?
The plant cell has a vacuole and an animal cell doesn't, and that's probably due to like photosynthesis and it needing water.
Yeah, the vacuole there. What were some of the other things that plant cells have that animals don't have? There's two big ones. And they are kind of the reasons why those were the two things that we talked about.
The cell wall.
Yes, the cell wall. Yep. And chloroplast. Yep. And why do you think they have those? Why the cell wall? Why?
It needs to protect itself.
Yes, and if you think about plants, right? They're not mobile. They're not really moving. Like if we look at trees and grasses and plants, they're kind of stuck there. And so they need this hard protective shell to protect them from the environment, from temperature change, from these structures, from the wind, because they aren't as mobile as animals are. Animals can migrate, animals can move. And so because of that structure and the way that they're built, they need that extra layer of protection and structure to them. All right, chloroplasts. What about chloroplasts?
Animal cells have chloroplasts that.
And what do we talk about chloroplasts? What does chloroplast do again?
The one who process the photosynthesis thing.
Yes. Yep, you are right. Chloroplasts are the ones that do photosynthesis in that process of photosynthesis. Exactly. And animals don't get energy that way. We're not green. We don't just lay around in the sun and get energy. How cool would that be though? If we could just like lay in the sun and be like, oh, I'm hungry. Let me just go lay outside.
That would be awesome.
Wouldn't that be awesome? I'm just like, I have the best tan ever. I'm green.
Yeah.
So why do I have the idea that plant cells are flat?
Oh.
Is that no? It looks a lot flat in the picture.
That's just yeah, but even this kind of has a flatness to it a little bit. That is a good argument. Plant cells might be a little more flatter than animal cells. I would have to research that a little bit more, but you might be onto something, because animal cells, there's so many types of animal cells. Like if we look at blood cells, very circular and like donut shaped, right? And plant cells are these like flat building blocks. I mean, if you look at skin cells in a human, this looks really similar to skin cells. So our skin cells would be like similar in shape and size. But yeah, I don't know. That's a good analysis. That could be a thing, that plant cells are often flatter than animal cells. You definitely do see this idea of animal cells being very round. Anything else? I talked to Anastasia in the breakout group, and Anastasia brought up something about animals in general and how they're different from plants. Did you want to share that, Anastasia?
Yes, I think the difference between plants and animals, because animals have blood cells and the plants doesn't.
Yep, plants don't have blood cells at all because they don't have blood running through them. So animals have these red blood cells and white blood cells going through our cardiovascular system. And we have a cardiovascular system where plants do not. They don't have blood vessels and veins pumping this blood through them to get energy, because we have to take in energy and then spread it throughout our body. All of their cells will have chloroplasts, so they're able to just be in the sun and get energy from that sunlight. We have to eat food digest it and then pump it through our entire body, through our respiratory and through our circulatory system. Absolutely. All right, the next thing I wanted to talk about was a quick science experiment that you can do at home. I'm assuming all of you, if not all, most of you, I mean, at all of us at some point do cook. And this is an activity you can do while cooking. The next time you are working with onions, I want you to take a little bit closer look to onions and see if you can see the cellular structure of onions. Here's a video for us to watch. Let me share our sound and start this video of an experiment that you can do. Now, this experiment will show like using iodine and different things to color it to make it easier to see. You don't need to use iodine or any of this to make it easier to see. You can actually just do it with your naked eye. If you had food coloring at home, if you put a little drop of food coloring on an onion, it would make it darker and you could see it better that way. But you don't need the iodine at all. You can still see it with your eye.
Today you're going to make a slide to view onion. Now, you're going to need iodine stain and make sure it is iodine. You're going to need a clean, dry slide, a cover slip, and a small piece of onion. So a piece of onion normally looks like this, the outer part and the inner part, and you're used to seeing the skin on the outside. We're actually going to peel the skin from the inside part of the onion. So when you get your small piece, take a look at it, make sure you know the outside from the inside. We're peeling the inside layer. So to do that, you need to just pull the edge up a little bit, and then you're going to get this little tiny thin layer. You can see it that I'm pulling. That's one cell layer thick. So pull that one layer, be really careful with it. We don't want to damage the cells. And put it on your slide. Now it's starting to roll a little bit. If it rolls and folds, just try to press it down.
Now at home, if you would actually just take that and like hold it up to the light and look at it through light, like through the window, you would actually see the little cellular structures by just holding it through the light.
So that's one cell layer thick. Pretty amazing. That's why you're going to be able to see through it. But we need to stain the cells because they're clear. So to stain it, you're going to put a few drops of iodine on it, and then I would let it sit for about maybe a minute. While you're waiting in that minute, you can clean up and organize your stuff. So I put a few drops on it, and I actually just saw it go under the onion piece.
Now, if you have, like I said, if you have food coloring at home, that'll actually do the same thing. And the only reason why they're doing this is because this will really highlight those organelles. If you just looked at it through the light, you would see all the little boxes, and the nucleus would be very, very, very faint, very faint. But by coloring it, it makes it this really dark color, so it'll actually look like this. And you'll see those dark nucleuses right there in those cells if you put a little bit of drop on it and you look really close enough. If you take a little magnifying glass and get a little bit of a closer look, you can really see the different structures inside the onion cell there. So that's kind of a fun experiment. I put a link to this video on the Google Classroom for you to watch again if you want. I think it's kind of something fun to do because we all cook at home and we often, a lot of us use onions when we do our cooking. So the next time you're doing some cooking, just take a little piece, peel it off, and see if you can see some structures. The reflection question that I put in the Google Classroom for us to do this week is, where else do we see cells around us? Most of them are going to be plant cells. Most of the human animal cells are too small for us to see with just the naked eye. But where else do we see cells around us? I gave you an example of leaves, right? We see all those cells in the leaves, and we saw this one with the cells of onion. Where else do you see any? So tell me if you tried this, tell me how it went, what the experience was like, and see if you can think of any other places, or Google. Try to Google search some other examples of cells and see what you can find. All right, moving on to common diseases. There's a few common diseases that are specifically related to cells and functions of cells. The first one we're going to look at is mitochondrial diseases. Just looking at the word, what part of the cell do you think is having an issue with this disease? What part of the cell is not working properly?
Mitochondria.
The mitochondria, exactly. And that's why by knowing some of these basic words, when you're working with a patient, you can have a general idea of what's going on. You're not a doctor. You don't really, you haven't spent years and years studying this, but we just want that general idea. This is just some basic vocabulary that you need to make that connection that mitochondria is a part of the cell. It's the powerhouse of the cell. It makes the energy of the cell. Ooh, this person is probably going to have a lot of lack of energy. They're going to feel tired, and let's read what mitochondrial disease is about. Who would like to read this passage for us?
I'll do it.
Okay, go ahead.
Mitochondrial diseases are chronic, long-term, genetic, often inherited disorder that occur when mitochondria fail to produce enough energy for the body to function properly. Inherited means the disorder was passed on from parents to children. Mitochondrial diseases can be present at birth, but can also occur at any age. Mitochondrial diseases can affect almost any part of the body, including the cells of the brain, nerves, muscles, kidneys, heart, liver, eyes, ears, or pancreas.
Very good. Yeah. And so the mitochondria are not functioning properly. One word that comes to mind for if we're looking at root words is the word chronic, which comes from, I think it is Greek for the word for time. What is the Greek? I'm Googling. Greek word for time. I think it's chronos. Yep, chronos, C-R-O-N-O-S. Chronos is the Greek word for time. So whenever we see the word chronic, it has to do with time. So a chronic illness is an illness or disease that lasts for a long period of time. All right, so that's one of our diseases, mitochondria. The next one is sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia, and this affects blood cells. Who would like to read this passage?
I can do that.
Okay, go ahead.
Sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia is an inherited red blood cell disorder in which there aren't enough healthy red blood cells to carry oxygen throughout your body. Normally, the flexible, round red blood cells move easily throughout blood vessels. In sickle cell anemia, the red blood are shaped like sickles or crescent moons.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Here's a picture. Oh, let me see if I can bring a picture over here. A sickle is a farming tool. I'll just move this over here. Here are pictures of sickles. It is an old farming tool that was used to use to cut grass and to cut crops when you were harvesting them. And so again, they're actually using it because this is what the cell shape is. The normal shape of a red blood cell is kind of like a donut, where it's thick on the outside and really thin on the, there's no hole, but it's almost like donut shaped, that it's thinner in the middle, thicker on the outside. But with sickle cell, it actually is like inverted and flipped on itself, and it's that crescent shape, which is really bad because it's not collecting the amount of oxygen that it needs. It's not collecting the things that it needs to transport it to all of the parts of the body. And this is also a genetic disorder, that the the cells themselves are shaped incorrectly. So that's another disease. And so when I hear the word sickle, I think of the shape, sickle, and that is then the shape of the red blood cell there. All right, and then our last disease to talk about is cystic fibrosis, which at first when we read it, we're like, but this has nothing to do with cells. Let's read this definition.
Cystic fibrosis is a hereditary disease that affects the lungs and digestive system. The body produces thick and sticky mucus that can clog the lungs and obstruct the pancreas. Cystic fibrosis can be life-threatening, and people with the condition tend to have a shorter than normal lifespan.
Very good. So when we read this, we're like, it has to do with the lungs and the lungs not functioning properly. But what's causing it is actually at the cellular level. Cystic fibrosis is caused by a malfunctioning of the cell membrane and the cell membrane ion channels. So again, we were looking at, let me find the picture of our cell membrane again. Where'd you go, Mr. Membrane? There you are. So we see all these like channels, right? These like spaces for things to go through, these channel ions, and those are not functioning properly. The right things and the bad things are not transporting themselves through the cell accurately, which is causing then this mucus buildup and all of these problems in the lungs for cystic fibrosis. I did want to talk about numbers a little bit. So the mitochondria diseases is somewhat popular. They say 1 out of every 5,000 people have some form of mitochondria diseases where the mitochondria are not functioning properly. Sickle cell anemia isn't as popular. There's fewer than 200,000 US cases per year of sickle cell anemia. One thing that is interesting about sickle cell anemia that scientists are discovering and why they've been discovering it is very popular among the African American population. Because it is a genetic disorder, it is your African American has a higher probability of having sickle cell anemia than other races. And so this was one thing that scientists were discovering, was like, why? What's causing that? And then cystic fibrosis, I don't know what the numbers are for cystic fibrosis in the United States, but these are 3 examples of diseases how it's actually the cells that are not functioning properly. Vocabulary for CNA. When you do the CNA training, you will get lists and lists of vocabulary words. Part of the purpose of this class is to kind of introduce you some of these, especially the acronyms and the abbreviations, to kind of give you a head start before you actually go through the CNA program. Here are 4 words that kind of relate to our lesson. The first 2 are acronyms, they're abbreviations. What are the first 2? RBC, WBC. What could those be? Any guesses?
I'll answer that.
Red
Red blood cell.
Yes, red blood cell and the C. Yep.
Or white blood cell on the
Yep, red blood cell, and the WBC would be the white. Yeah. And we're very interested in counting them. What do we know about red blood cells and white blood cells? What's the difference between them besides the color? We're like, well, one's red and one's white. What do we know about them?
I know that red blood cell is supposed to be much higher in number compared to white blood one.
Yes, our red blood cell is a higher number and it's supposed to be higher. Definitely put an H here for higher number. What else do we know?
Red blood cells move oxygen, white blood cells are for protecting yourself.
Yep, we got it. Red blood cells are all of the nutrients. So we have oxygen, but all of the things that we need, all of that energy. When you digest food, it goes into our bloodstream, and those red blood cells, they're basically carrying all the nutrients throughout your entire body. Everything that you need, your red blood cells are carrying it through there. White blood cells are like your soldiers, they're protective. And so when you have bacteria or diseases or viruses, your white blood cells are coming to attack foreign bodies that are in your system.
They're almost suicidal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. They die in the process of defending off those other things. Yep. They're your body's defense system. And we're very interested in healthcare in looking at the numbers, because if someone has a high level of white blood cells, what does that mean about their body?
Their body's fighting an infection.
Yes, there is something wrong. Yep, it's fighting an infection, or the body thinks there's an infection. And sometimes that happens a lot, like for example, with organ donation, right? You're introducing this foreign body into this foreign object into the body. It may be something good, like a new liver or a new pancreas, this new organ, new kidney, but the body thinks that, oh, something's wrong, it's not supposed to be here, let's fight it off. And so there are many reasons why we would track the levels of white blood count. And then we see some illnesses and diseases like HIV affects your white blood cells. And so you see the white blood cell count decreasing. And so that's why a person that has HIV, and if it develops to AIDS, their immune system doesn't function properly because they can't produce the amount of white blood cells needed to fight off simple diseases and infections. All right, cell is one of the vocabulary words, so we know cell, and then the other one is metabolism.
The process of digesting?
Yes, but at the cellular level. So digestion is what's going on in our stomach, right? So that food goes into our stomach, it breaks down. Metabolism is then how does that enter your blood system? How does that energy get taken to other parts, and how do cells convert that energy? We will do a reading here next on metabolism of how those food particles and that energy enter cells, and how do cells break them up and use them. And so here is the digestion process of food. We see this in our diagram here. We see different parts. I see the cell membrane, right? That is allowing good things to come in. So it's coming through the cell membrane. We see a part of the cell called the lysomes. And that lysome takes the food particle and it actually captures it. That lysome then produces amino acids, which you see here, the enzymes. And then those enzymes then digest the food, which then allows it to then use that energy. So here is our diagram. Looking at that diagram, we do have a few questions. Question number one. What does the lysome contain to digest food? What do we see? What does it contain? What does the lysome contain? Our answers are A, cell membrane, B, digestive enzymes, vacuoles, and food particles. It is letter B. Very good. Okay, number two. Based on the illustration, what is the purpose of the food vacuole? So our food vacuole is this one right here. It's transporting the food. We have the food vacuoles form and fuse with lysosomes. It forms and it fuses. Fuse is like this. We're looking for other words that mean form and fuse. What do we got? Digest food particles, to make digestive enzymes, to transport food to lysosomes, to enter through the cell membrane.
To transport food to lysosomes?
Yes, to form and fuse. Yep, to transport. So it's forming it, it's taking it, and connecting it. Form and fuse. Very good. All right, here is another reading we have specifically about the cell membrane and all of those channels, those spaces between them. So here's the cell membrane. Who would like to read this passage for us?
I can do it.
Okay, go ahead.
The cell membrane, which encloses the cell, is made up of lipids, fats, and proteins. It allows only substances that dissolve in lipids to move freely into and out of the cell. Oxygen is an example of a lipid-soluble substance. Water and water-soluble substances, such as glucose, need proteins to help move them across the cell membrane.
Mm-hmm. All right, first question. What does the illustration show us? What does the picture show us here? Options are the way cells reproduce, the nucleus of a cell, the contents of a typical cell, or the structures of the cell membrane.
E?
D, very good. We see the structures of the cell membrane. And if you get into all the way up to like the nursing program, you will actually spend, so to get a degree in nursing, some of the classes you'll take are actually human anatomy classes, where you will take an entire week focusing on one part of the body. So you might actually take, one of them might be parts of the cell, and you will spend an entire 15, 20 minutes really looking at these different parts of the cell membrane and exactly what they're doing, when they're doing it, and how it allows good things in and bad things out, and how it knows which is which. And so that's how in-depth you will get in nursing programs. I'm kind of just trying to scoot across the surface of knowledge for us to get just a brief introduction to them. All right, the next one, our cell nucleus. So here we see our diagram. The nucleolus is the center of the nucleus, the body that helps form proteins to make the structure of the cell. We have the nuclear envelope, membrane that encloses the nucleus. We have pores, opening in the nuclear envelope. So the cell nucleus controls the function of the cell and contains the cell's genetic material. So again, like I was saying, the nucleus as a whole is kind of like the brain of the cell. It's in charge, it's telling everything what to do and when to do it. All right, what is the most likely function of the pores? To A, let materials in and out of the nucleus, to enclose genetic material within the nucleus, to seal the nuclear envelope, to help form proteins.
A?
A, very good. We're just thinking critically there, pores. So pores are these holes. I know that this copy of this image isn't that clear, but it allows things in and out of the nucleus. Okay, here's animal cells. Here's the mitochondria itself. And so again, you might actually in a nursing program get even deeper in the actual structures of the mitochondria, the different parts, and how it creates the energy, what proteins it makes, the whole process of how it does that. Okay, here's a few questions about mitochondria. What is the purpose of the illustration on an animal cell mitochondria? So what is the purpose of this illustration? It shows how mitochondria changes over time. It shows the parts of a whole mitochondria. It shows how materials move through the cells. It shows the process of making energy.
Letter D.
Ooh. Letter D. I disagree. They're trying to trick us here on this question. What is the purpose of this illustration?
To show the parts of a whole microphone.
Yes. Yeah. To show the parts of it. B is our correct answer. That is the purpose of this diagram. Okay. Based on the illustration, which statement describes the mitochondrion? It is the largest structure inside the cell. It has two membranes. It is part of the nucleus. It can move easily in and out of the cell. What do we got?
It has two membranes.
It does have two membranes. Very good. And we know these are not true. What is the largest structure of the cell? Well, there's kind of a few answers for that one. What's the largest structure of the cell? The nucleus. Some people might argue that the cytoplasm, the actual like space between everything is larger, the cytoplasm, but it's just kind of like empty space. The cell membrane goes all the way around it. For some plant cells, the cell wall might be bigger if you count it all up. Like if I go back to the, if we look at this video again of the onion cells.
Today you're gonna make.
So here we see that, close that there. We see the nucleus really clearly because it is the biggest organelle. But some people might argue that the cell wall is actually bigger than the nucleus if you added up all of the contents of the cell wall, and that the cytoplasm, the space, that empty space between everything, is bigger. But when we actually look at like functioning organelles, the nucleus is the biggest one. Mitochondria is probably the second biggest. It's very important. We know it's not a part of the nucleus, and we know it doesn't move in and out. Those organelles do not move in and out of the cell. All right. What information does the caption provide? This caption here: mitochondria in animal cells release energy stored in foods such as sugar. What information does the caption provide?
The function.
Very good. It's the function of mitochondria, and we know that they are the powerhouse. All right, perfect. There's one more reading that you can do. This is over meiosis, which we will look at when we get into the 4th week, when we specifically look at human development, and we'll look at how babies are made and how we form sex cells and how genetics works with human beings. There's this reading we're not going to go to because we don't have time, but there is a reading over how we create sex cells and how we get the DNA from our parents, and how we get 50% from our mom and 50% of our dad, and how that mixing of DNA works when they create their sex cells. There's that reading, and then there's everything that is posted online. So that was our first week, all focusing on the cell, the human cell.